What's up, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, and all the trips at sea, all the ships at sea? It is your boy, the OGGM. It's about 5 o'clock in the afternoon on the 15th day of February. Half off Valentine's candy and the beginning of Easter candy. Oh, God. It is 60 degrees and sunny with a very cold cutting wind running here through Ventura, California. And we have a little bit of news, which leads us into another tabletop role-playing game that I absolutely love. So the news is that apparently we've been talking about cryptocurrency a little bit and which sites are going to be taking cryptocurrency and how cryptocurrency is slowly taking over the retail market. I'm sure as time progresses, we're going to see more and more stores accepting cryptocurrency. We're going to see more and more of the cryptocurrency ATMs. We might even start seeing gold ATMs. I don't know. So it's hard to explain what a Cryptocoin NFT is, because how do you explain something that doesn't actually exist? But if you're familiar with Doggo coins or the cryptocurrency that's based upon images, because, images, when you draw an image, it's no two images are exactly the same, and that's a series of zeros and one that's completely different than another series of zeros and one when you convert it to a digital image, and that is now considered a form of cryptocurrency similar to crypto coins. Don't ask me to explain how it works. I don't know. It's magic. Speaking of magic, so apparently, see how I did that? Apparently, some individuals scanned some magic cards and tried to make them into NFT crypto coins. Wizards of the Coast found out about it, and they were not very happy. Either because A, you were using their images to make money without their permission, or B, because they don't want to be associated with cryptocurrency right now, and they probably feel like, hey, you did this without our permission and we don't want this, or C, because they have their own plans to make cryptocurrency of their own at some point in time, so they don't want somebody making it ahead of time. Probably has something with 1 and 3, something to do with images and copyrights and turning images into digital funds and violating the artists, because the artists, have to get a percentage, and I don't know. There's math and money involved, but basically somebody scanned some magic cards, made them into digital reproductions, made those digital reproductions into NFTs. Wizards of the Coast found out about it, slammed it down, said, no, remove them. You don't want you using our art without our permission, because bam, that's our money, and bam, we're probably going to do it ourselves someday. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Wizards of the Coast cryptocurrency NFTs before 2025, and I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see a virtual tabletop streaming service, possibly sponsored by Wizards of the Coast or Critical Role by 2025. Which leads us into, of course, the topic of Tuesdays and Thursdays all this month, tabletop role-playing games I absolutely love for no reason whatsoever. And of course, this was all a lead-in because I'm talking about the digital frontier and computers and cryptocurrency, which means I must be talking about Cyberpunk. I would list Cyberpunk 2020 and the Cyberpunk genre and the Cyberpunk fad as one of the 4 things that really shattered and changed the tabletop role-playing game market in the late 80s, early 90s. I fell deeply, deeply in love into the Cyberpunk genre. I do not know why, but I cut my hair. I started dressing cyberpunk. I wrote the complete Cyberpunk dictionary. I read every Cyberpunk book I could find. I watched every Cyberpunk movie I could find. Probably because of my love of Blade Runner is probably why. I loved the Cyberpunk system, the interlock system. I thought had so much potential. Now I look at it now and I'm like, oh my God, the system was a mess. What am I thinking? But back then I just loved it. I loved everything about it. I loved how fast it was, how simple it was. I loved the life paths. I loved the roles. I loved the made-up language. I loved the imagery. I loved the game. I loved running Cyberpunk. I loved playing Cyberpunk. I loved my part in the history of GURPS Cyberpunk. And, of course, we all know what happened with GURPS Cyberpunk. And what's more punk than having your game company raided by the Secret Service? I spoke to Mike Poundsmith multiple times. I did a lot of stuff with Artisolian. I wrote some stuff for them. I play tested stuff for them. I helped them create what would eventually become the Fusion system, which would also eventually become the Silhouette system. I wrote a complete skill system for Cyberpunk and a complete skill system for Fusion, which Mike Taylor once said is probably the best skill system for role-playing games he's ever seen, so much that he cribbed it, and it eventually was, became part of the Silhouette system. Something about just the multiple D10s I liked. Something about just the language, the imagery. I loved Bubblegum Crisis. I loved Ghost in the Shell. I loved Metal Skin Panic. I loved all the Cyberpunk anime, Black Magic M66, ADP, just that Blade Runner Cyberpunk cartoon anime that we were getting bombarded with, and so many cheap Cyberpunk films. We had Mad Max and all the other post-Holocaust films, and we had all these like cheesy sci-fi Cyberpunk films that were hitting us, like, Hardware and Overdrawn at the Memory Bank, and of course Church Windows, the Cyberpunk miniseries that featured William Gibson and his favorite, his infamous line where he's being interviewed by a reporter and he's playing a version of himself in the future, and they're like, oh, here's William Gibson, the man who invented the term cyberspace. And he just looks very forlorn and sad and looks at the reporter and goes, yeah, and they've never let me forget it. So, just, I think, a comment on his influence on the industry and how, just everything he predicted, with the exception of flying cars, has come true. If you look at, Akihabara, Japan right now, or Tokyo, Japan, it is the city from Blade Runner, minus the buildings that have columns of flame spouting out of them. Not to say there aren't places that have buildings with columns of flame spouting out of them in the middle of densely populated areas, because there probably are. But in Japan, you look at Akihabara or Tokyo or Shinjuku or any of those places, and you're like, damn, that's the city from Blade Runner. Gibson was right. I can literally buy anything from a vending machine, including probably bullets. So yeah, I just love Cyberpunk. I love the system. I love the genre. I love the movies. I love the music. William Gibson himself said that if there was one band that was probably Cyberpunk, it was Sig Sig Sputnik. There was a couple other bands, in the net, Transvision Vamp, Aphex Twins, Billy Idol, of course, Green Day, the Sex Pistols. I dived in to Cyberpunk so much, and Cyberpunk was so much part of my life. GURPS Cyberpunk, Cyberpunk 2020. I wrote a Cyberpunk game, I wrote the Fusion games, and I just loved it. I don't know why, because I look back at it now and I'm like, what was it about this? I grew up in the Valley in the 80s, so punk was, California punk was already deep in my veins, and I was already, pretty close to being punk anyways. You growing up in the Valley in the 80s, in the summer, I lived, within walking distance of the brother of the drummer from the Go-Go's. We used to play D&D with Tom Lindgren, shout out to Tom Lindgren, and be able to listen to the Go-Go's practicing. So punk was already ingrained in my life, coming out of high school and being a very bullied kid. So obviously, yeah, just Cyberpunk sang to me. And I listed, right up there, Cyberpunk 2020, GURPS, and Vampire the Masquerade are the three games that came out about the same time and really just shattered the glass ceiling and opened up the world to possibilities of that there could be other games, and brought people to the table who up to now we didn't really see at the table. Back then D&D was sort of just a white boy club. Yes, it's true, although that is also not true, because I played D&D with people who of every shape, size, color, religion, gender, whatever. So, but D&D had this image of it being the rich white boy club, rich white nerdy boy club, which is of course completely untrue. But suddenly here these games where anybody could come play. Not that, anybody could play D&D. That's a myth that we gatekeeped anybody. I know there's some people who says we should have gatekeeped, but no. If you showed even a interest in D&D, we would invite you. Of course, I didn't play D&D at college. I was playing superhero role-playing games pretty much all the time, or a couple other homebrew games, but nobody was playing D&D when I was in college until GURPS came along, and then suddenly everybody was converting every game to GURPS, and then Cyberpunk came along, and we were all playing Cyberpunk, and then we had the Vampire coming along, and everybody was playing Vampire, and D&D was just forgotten. I mean, there was a couple years there where nobody was playing D&D. And Cyberpunk was one of the 3 games that I think really shattered that paradigm. And it's just such an important part of my life. Somewhere out there is the complete Cyberpunk dictionary that I wrote and published. It was in the Space Gamer and Fantasy Gamer. And somewhere out there is the skill system I wrote for Fusion and Interlock that eventually sort of became the Fusion system, that eventually kind of became whatever it is Mike Taylor did with it, which I think had some, influence on the Silhouette system. If you can still find it on the internet, any of the stuff I wrote for Fusion is still up there. If you can still find a copy of Cyber Generation from Art Thessalonian, you can see that my name's on it. And, so yeah, games I absolutely love for no reason whatsoever other than just, I can't explain why Cyberpunk captured my heart so much. It's hard to picture the me back then now and go, what? Of course, I still listen to the music, so I guess I still haven't, once you're punk, you're always punk, even though I hate people using the word punk in anything other than cyberpunk. Thank you, William Gibson, for Neuromancer. Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't have the Matrix without Gibson, which means we wouldn't have cryptocurrency without Gibson, which of course leads us back to how this all began with the fact that somebody out there was using magic to make Magic the Gathering cards into cryptocurrency, and they got caught by Wizards of the Coast. Yeah, there you go. Ha ha ha. Isn't that amazing how I managed to do that all? Anyways, that's me talking about tabletop role-playing games and a little bit of news for you this evening. If you appreciate the content, let me know. If you don't appreciate the content, let me know. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe yet, help me subscribe. I'm at 650 right now. The goal is 1,000 by August 4th. So please help me reach it and we'll do something crazy. Till next time, I am the OGGM, your guide to all the tabletop role-playing game news, weather, sports, and general internet nonsense, reminding you to get out of my internet, you damn cyber kids. See ya.